Hi everyone, and welcome to Screams After Midnight, the weekly YouTube horror show which reviews films from the past and the present in the horror genre from the Mailed Fuzz podcast network. I'm Peter Bradley, and with me is Tim.
Hello.
Joseph.
Hello.
And Kevin.
Hello.
I just skipped the last name, so I didn't have to pronounce Kevin's surname. Alright, so this is our second episode. Last week we did Prince of Darkness. This week we're going to delve into Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2. Why? Because Insidious Chapter 3 is out this Friday, and we'll be doing that next week. So, Insidious 1 and 2, I think, are probably two of the better horror films of recent times, particularly the first one. It's a film which, on face value, it looks like a standard sort of haunted house suspense movie, but actually ends up being much deeper once you actually see it. So let's talk about the first film first. That would make sense. We'll stick to that one. So just in general then, who will I go to first? Joseph. Since you raised your hand. I didn't know we were playing with school rules, but okay, you raise your hand, so we'll go to Joseph. Thoughts on Insidious?
As you were saying, it played off the haunted house rules, but flipped it on its head. Most of my personal top 10 horror films are haunted house films, especially older ones. So going into it, the first time I ever watched it, that was what was drawing me in. And of course, I did appreciate the deeper mythology that you get to uncover, and how it's not
actually,
a haunted house.
I was going to pause you for 1 second. Not yes. To say anything about anything you just said, just because I forgot to do it last week and this week. Full spoilers for the movies we're going to talk about in this show. Right, with that out of the way, continue.
So it's not exactly a haunted house film. It's not the house that is haunted. It's your son, as the film so plainly says.
My timing was perfect there, because you were just going into spoilers.
And that is probably why I would say that I very much enjoy the first film. It doesn't play exactly by the haunted house genre, though it does bring you in through that. It's a very fun film. Little camp, but it's fun throughout.
Yeah, I agree it's a little camp, especially when you get to the second half, and most people who don't like the film tend to agree that it's when the investigators show up that their interest starts to drip out. Partly because they're a bit more slapstick, and partly because they just don't like the route the film goes down. And I often hear the complaint that, the guy just looks like Darth Maul.
The lipstick demon?
Yeah.
Oh.
Which I don't particularly agree with. I mean, yeah, he does have a sort of Darth Maul looking look to him, but Darth Maul actually looked cool. That's one of the most positive things I can say about those Star Wars prequels. But no, it's a really great film. It, like you say, it draws you in with the haunted house stuff. It really does. It's the same sort of thing. Hearing noises in the night, things happen that are unexplained, but it goes down that very unique route, and it builds its own mythology of going into the further, and sleepwalking with the dead and all the rest of it. Lots of really interesting things. I also think it's got one of my favourite jump scares. Not that the film relies on jump scares, but it does have a few good ones. And I think it has my favourite one of like the past 15, 20 years. And that's the one where the guys...
can I take a guess?
Oh, go for it.
Well, I'm just gonna guess because I've heard a lot of people that mention this part of the movie, but is it when they're like around the table and the mom sees the demon behind the guy?
No.
Okay, I know a lot of people that quote that as like their favorite part of the movie.
That's good. Don't get me wrong.
Okay.
That's a decent scare. But no, the one I really like is when the guy, one of the ghosts, is pacing outside the window, and Rose Brown's watching him, and then he just keeps pacing, and then he paces into the foreground. It's a really neat little camera trick, but I really liked it, and it properly made me jump the first time I watched it. I was really impressed. Because it's not often that I jump in horror. I mean, obviously, everyone on this show watches a lot of horror movies, so it becomes hard. Except Kevin, but we'll get to Kevin in a minute. But it gets harder to scare you, and I think I'm always impressed when it does, or not scared, but jump when you're actually thrown out your seat in some way.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, I think that's one of the most positive things that I can say about the movie, because, yeah, I kind of consider myself almost completely desensitized to horror at this point. Like, there really isn't anything in a movie that can scare me. But I remember when I first saw this, I didn't really hear much about it beforehand, but on the weekend it came out, I'd started hearing a lot of really good things. So I went to there. This was actually when I was living back in Rhode Island. I went to this theater near my house, and I was actually the only person in the theater. And so it was like late, like Sunday, like 9, 10 o'clock showing, and yeah, like it did, like it's like I wasn't like terrified or anything like when I watched it, but like when it did end and like uh after all the credits rolled, the lights didn't go on, like up at the theater like they normally do. Like once the movie's
You
over.
were in the further.
Yeah, like I was just like in this movie theater, just completely surrounded in darkness after the movie ended, and like I did feel like a little like creeped out. I was like, oh, like that was pretty good.
Speaking of good jumps, even the opening title of the film, I think made me jump
Right.
when I first seen it because they decided to put that extremely loud music sting,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Violin.
and I guess that's kind of embracing that slightly campness. It's like I wouldn't say it's an overly camp film, but you're kind of right. It embraces some of the elements that some people who don't like horror would just look at and laugh at and go, "That's silly" or "That's ridiculous," but that's kind of the fun of the film, is that it takes them seriously and explores it in an interesting way. Okay, so Kevin is the more horror noob here. So what do you? How did you like the way it played with things? If you liked it at all, that is, you might have hated it.
No, I did. I liked it.
Actually, was this the first time you've seen it when you watched it this week?
Oh no, I'd seen it before. What I liked was one of my favorite things about the film was how it played with the audience's view of the unknown, and how it would wait until it would like have a little delay, and then it would reveal something, and then there was a part in it where Renee follows like the child, and like the apparition, and she follows it into the room, and there's a rocking horse, and it's rocking. And then you expect the kid to be onto it, to be on the rocking horse, and like a jump scare to happen, but like the door like opens, and the rocking horse is just rocking, and I think that was really cool. And I think how in like the first half of the film they didn't really show you much, but you were still scared because it built up anticipation towards what the actual thing was, but. Yeah, overall it was great, and I loved how it kept misleading you into thinking certain things and then doing other with what it did.
Yeah, there's a lot of that actually. That sort of slightly offbeat jumps. Like they'd almost have the beat where the jump would be, and then it'd happen a second later.
Yeah.
Just to make you feel a little bit off kilter. Yeah, certainly.
One thing that I also like really kind of liked about it along those same lines is I feel like they try to insert like creepiness into a lot of like kind of settings that you normally don't see, like like so many times in horror movies it's always the basement, the attic, creepy stuff happening at night, but there's a lot of scenes here where it'd just be like broad daylight and something creepy would be going on, or she would just be like in the like middle of the day just crossing the kitchen or the living room, and like something would happen. And I thought it was really cool how like they weren't just kind of sticking to those classic creepy scenarios or places you normally see.
Yeah, but at the same time they kind of embraced them at the same, because like the shot that it keeps returning to that I actually really liked how sort of over the top it was the shot outside the house where it'd be panning, but the lens would be really sort of obscured, so the house looked really weird and sort of stood out. Made the house feel alive almost. But it did it to not only the first house but also the second house.
Oh yeah,
because they move halfway through the film. But no, Insidious is a solid film that really, kind of like you, Tim, I wasn't expecting anything from it, but then I started hearing good buzz when it came out.
Also, not only that, but I remember that I was not too happy with the director's other two movies he did before this, Saw and Dead Silence. I really don't like either one of those.
I like
So
the first Saw enough.
I mean, it's definitely the best out of all those movies, but
Whole
even
seven
that
of
one
them.
I don't. Yeah,
Not
even
saying
that one I
much,
don't really
though.
like. Yeah,
The Dead Silence, I will agree with you. That is.
yeah.
I have not had the pleasure of Dead Silence, but yeah,
You scream, you die.
I think James Wan definitely got onto something here because obviously he went on to do The Conjuring as well, which
Yeah.
got a lot of decent buzz and around it. And then he's stepped out of the horror now and he's doing big action movies that are doing well. So that's all very cool actually, and it's nice to see him expand like that. But I think this is his best film, still.
I'm more Conjuring.
More Conjuring.
Yeah, I like The Conjuring. Just slightly more than this one.
I like The Conjuring, and we'll probably talk about that someday, so I won't go too much into it. But I will say
Okay.
that that's more the classic haunted
House.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
more the classic.
What is my preference?
Yeah.
Whereas I really like how this plays with things and subverts your expectations. I think that's
Yes.
I think it's a lot of fun in that regard. In fact, the day I seen this, I often go and see two films back to back at the cinema because it's a bit of a trip, so it just makes things cheaper to see two in one trip. So I seen this, and obviously this starred Rose Byrne, and I seen this the same day that I seen X-Men First Class. So I had a very good day at the cinema because I also really liked that. But 10 minutes into X-Men First Class, and Rose Byrne's in that, I'm like, I recognise her from somewhere. What else has she been in? I seen her in something else recently. What was it? And then I went home and looked her up on IMDb, and it was literally the movie I had just seen immediately before it. Well. So yeah, that's Insidious. That's the first Insidious. Now, obviously, I was apprehensive about a second film coming out because the first film did such a great job of subverting expectations and just being a great gem sort of in the rough of modern horror. And I have to say the second one definitely isn't as strong as the first one. It's definitely, the pacing's a little bit it's not as well paced. It's a little off kilter. There's a few
Very off.
There's a few hammier moments in it. That said, though, I do think it is a solid second outing. I like what it does to expand the mythology. I like that it delves into the past. I like a lot of the things it does. I mean, I do think the opening made me worried when I seen it because I was already a bit nervous about it. But the opening scene, they do this thing where they take the main actress who plays Eloise, they take her voice and dub it over
Overdubbed.
the young actress
Yeah.
who's playing on the flashback, and it's really obvious, it's really fake looking, and then the other
Yeah.
guy's got a fake beard, which also
I promise it won't hurt.
that really put me on edge. Luckily though, once it got back to the main story, and that scene did serve a purpose because it set up some cool stuff later on with time travel and the further. I liked them delving into the because the old woman who was after Joshua in the first movie, which was a really cool thing they added in really late on in that film. It was really, I don't know if they planned to go back into it like this in a sequel, but it
No.
did really open it up for it because
Yeah, I was actually wondering about that because the way they end it in the first movie, I was wondering if they even were thinking about doing a sequel at all, and then
Yeah.
if they did, if it was going to be tied in so much.
I looked up some trivia right before that we recorded this, and no, they didn't have plan out the Bride in Black at all until they started production on this one.
well, that's impressive. Then they managed to write such a interesting story that ties into it so well, because that could have easily been a mess, and maybe that's just a testament to Wan and his writers for it
Yeah.
working out as well as it does. Because I do like how it goes into it. I like that it's subverts your expectations. You think it's this creepy old woman. It turns out to be no. It's actually a guy who cross dresses because he did that when he killed people back in the 70s or whenever, and he did that because his mother wanted him to be a girl and dressed him up as a girl when he was a kid. And it just keeps adding these layers and adding these sort of dark, cynical things, and it just keeps building and building. And I really liked all that sort of stuff. In fact, speaking, just to go back to the first film, I really liked the ending to that. I liked the idea that this insidious purpose, what the film was really about, was this woman getting to Josh after all this time. And I thought that was a really fun thing. So it was really nice to explore that. So we shall go in reverse. Tim, Insidious 2.
I agree with like a lot of what you said. Yeah, not as strong as the first. It's in a weird way. I almost like it as much as the first, but like less as a horror movie and more like for like the kind of cool like time travel stuff and like connecting it to the first one, and almost like a little bit of a like murder mystery kind of, well, maybe not to go that far, but like they're researching this like serial killer and stuff. So yeah, like I didn't find it as scary or creepy, but I really liked it for all that kind of stuff that it added to it.
Yeah, it definitely went into that mythology a bit more. I think the moment where I felt more at ease in the second film was when it quickly flashes to the real Joshua in the Nether try to play the piano, and you realise it's him trying to contact them. Yeah. And it was at that point where I felt more comfortable. Like, okay, they know what they're doing. I think they're going down the right path for me. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's you can't be sure until the movie's over, really.
Yeah.
Right, Kevin, what did you think of Insidious 2?
Much like Tim and yourself said, I didn't think it was as strong as the first one. I did enjoy it somewhat, but I was not happy to see the return of Specs and Turner. I didn't like them from
You didn't like Comic Relief?
They were like Jar Jar Binks of the Insidious franchise.
I wouldn't go that far. That's a bit harsh.
See, but the weird thing is that I like them. I just don't know if I like them necessarily in this movie. Like, they're like I like their scenes, but it is always kind of like a sudden like jolt of like, oh, we're doing this now.
Yeah, like, they kind of require Eloise to make them work.
Yeah,
I agree with that. Also, the really random bit comes out of nowhere where he puts his hand on the other guy's knee.
Oh yeah,
and it's sort of like, over. Wait, is there a gay subplot now? What's going on? It was a funny moment though, because the other guy just sort of looks at it. It was kind of like two friends who've been around each other for years, and then one of them just sort of like, oh, by the way, I kind of fancy you.
Yeah.
So in that way, it was kind of amusing, but I don't. That did seem a bit out of place. I also thought there was some generally creepy scenes in this one though as well that work. I don't know if maybe creepy is the word, but like when I'm terrible with character names. Unless it's a TV show that's been running for like 3 years, I'm not going to remember anyone's name. But when the investigator guy, the older guy, who with the
dice,
the dice, the guy with the dice, when he goes in to talk to possessed Joshua, and he just comes out with like he's rolling dice to find out what he's got behind the back, and then he just changes. Yeah. He realizes it's not going to work if he just uses Joshua, so he's like, "What is Parker? Whatever." Hold a bit, and like the change in Patrick Wilson's face is like really impressive. Like it was really creepy. It was really impressive, and I like that he played with that, and he got to do a lot of cool stuff in this movie where he got to play both him, not himself, but the Joshua and the serial killer who inside Joshua.
Does anyone else think that Patrick Wilson looks very like Rob Schneider?
I never even thought about that.
No,
not really. No.
Maybe like a much more handsome older brother or something.
At the very start of the very first film, when he was lying in bed with his wife, I thought it was Rob Schneider.
The film would have taken a very different turn if Rob Schneider to the star.
Rob Schneider horror film.
Well, to be fair, most of his films are horrific.
Different way though.
I mean, I wake up in a cold sweat just thinking about having to watch one. I think Insidious 2 is definitely a weaker film, but it's still solid, I think, for the most part. I think it does a lot of interesting things, which is why perhaps I'm a little bit nervous of the third one, because part 3s traditionally are the ones that go down quite a bit, go down under, and the trailers for this one are interesting. They keep implying that it's going back to the past or something, and I don't know. I think it might in part, but I think most of the trailers are actually in the present day, because I'd forgotten about this until I watched the second one again. But the second one ends, because I remember jumping ahead
with another cliffhanger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Although, but this time they'd wrapped up the story of the family, and we're on to just like Eloise and the investigators, like going to investigate other stuff now, which is good because I think
She's the most interesting character.
she is, but I think it's also a wise choice because that family story was so well done, and it was also so well mixed in with the second film that I'd be like, it would get into Saw territory if they tried to then reweave more into it as time went on. It's nice that that story's concluded, and now the investigators who would naturally be going to other paranormal events are going to go and investigate those. And then Eloise is still involved, but as a ghost, which is actually really interesting and really cool. But in that cliffhanging scene, it actually goes to Eloise, and she goes to a girl who's in a wheelchair. And the trailer for the third film has a girl who's been in an accident, is in a wheelchair, and I don't know if that relates. I don't know if that's going to connect, because when I seen the trailer for the third one, I just assumed that the cliffhanger from 2 was just and they're off on their own adventures, but it wasn't actually going to link up. But now that I've seen it again, I'm thinking, oh, maybe it will actually connect in some way, which would be cool.
I don't think I've actually seen the trailer for Chapter 3 yet, going in blind.
It looks decent, like it looks fine. I mean, it could go either way. I mean, horror films, I think the trailers can always look great or look bad, but it has absolutely no bearing usually on if the film's good or bad. It could sync up or it could not. It looks fine. It's got a really nice bit where a girl's, and I know it's present day because they're texting, a girl's like texting the boy next door who she's got a bit of a thing with, and because she hears knocking on the wall, and apparently this is something they do. But then he texts back saying that, oh, wait, I'm at my grand's or whatever, I'm not there. It's a creepy little moment. So I'm hoping 3 is good, but do you guys have anything else you want to say about 1 or 2, or just the series as a whole?
Well, you did skip me on the Insidious Chapter 2.
Oh, sorry, I
thought.
I do apologise, Joseph. You must have so much to say. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I thought you were skipping me because, honestly, I did not like Chapter 2, unlike you, all 3 of you. Wow. The more they went into mythology, the more disinterested I became, the more disappointed I became. I did like the little twist on Parker actually being a man, though when I started seeing more cliches of the serial killers always being the mother causing them to, and I was hoping the movie would constantly seem to escape cliches, seeing as the screenwriter wrote movie cliches above his head as he wrote the screenplay, including having them move out as soon as the haunting began. I was hoping it would continue to escape, but I just became more and more disinterested as mythology was further explored. I like a bit more of a mystery. I understand, though, with a sequel, you have to answer a few more questions, or else viewers will get a little aggravated. Nothing else is explained, but this one, the further just became so a lot less interesting to me. Part of the reason why I'm probably coming into Chapter 3 a little blind is I just don't want anything else explored for me until I get in there. But Chapter 2 really did not do much for me, as opposed to Chapter 1, which I very much enjoyed. Chapter 2, I looked at my clock a few times to see, is it ending soon?
Well, I can see where you're coming from, because I mean, there's a lot of things where I would argue that mystery is a better thing, and explaining too much is against it. And yeah, I mean, the whole killer doing things because his mother was horrible to him or whatever is a bit of a cliche, but I do also feel like that was kind of it also embracing some of the cliches as well. Like, you know how we're talking about how it's embracing the campiness of the genre and stuff. I felt like that was part of that as well, so it worked for me. I can see why it wouldn't, though. I can certainly see why. I mean, the second film is definitely weaker. No one's going to argue otherwise, I don't think.
No.
But I think
it was more of a significant drop for me, though, than it was for you. A lot of you said it was close, but not the same. Mine was a bit more of a significant drop.
Well, that's a shame, but I can only speak to myself, and I still quite enjoyed it. So
I'm going to be the tough one. I
don't know. Kevin can be quite tough. We'll see how this goes. What will we rate out of this week? Last week it was Bloody Knives. How many very still deceased corpses out of 10 would you give Insidious 1?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Very still deceased corpses.
Okay.
Would you give Insidious 1 and then Insidious 2 out of 10? Kevin?
Insidious 1, 8. Insidious 2, 6.
Tim.
For the first one, I'd probably go. I'd do like an 8 and then like a 7 for the second.
Joseph.
Insidious 1, 7, still deceased corpses out of 10, and Insidious Chapter 2, 5, still deceased corpses out of 10.
Alright, for myself, Insidious number 1 would be 8.5 deceased corpses, meaning the ninth one's been chopped in half in some horrible accident. And then Insidious 2, I would go with a 7, I think, for that. So, yeah, well, I mean, I think it's clear to say, though, that it's maybe one of the more promising horror franchises of recent years.
Haven't had a really good one for a while, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Insidious 1 and 2. We'll be back next week with Insidious Chapter 3, a fresh new release. And then after that, I mean, don't get me wrong, Insidious 3 could be terrible, so we may get my wish anyway. After that, I will definitely be picking a bad horror movie, because I want to diverse things a little bit.
And then, actually, if I can just have one final closing thought, if that's all right.
Go for it.
I just wanted to clear up something that I said on Facebook earlier. I think some people were confused about.
I know. I know this one.
I had referred to these Insidious movies as basically the Taylor Swift of horror movies, and what I just kind of meant by that is that I don't know, they kind of feel like almost kind of like a pop song, like the horror equivalent of a pop song to me. Like they seem to be a little more flash than substance. Like it's like but the flash that's there is done really, really well. Like I don't know, because like you feel like the characters, you don't really get to know them that much. They're not that deep, and it kind of seems like it's just a lot of like random creepy scenes thrown in there. Like I don't know, like sometimes I almost got the feeling that the director was almost like, all right, yeah, and then we'll put like a little street urchin kid from the 40s, like, oh, what does that have to do with the story? Nothing, but it'll be creepy. Like I feel like there's a lot of stuff like that, but it was done so well that it didn't really bother me.
I don't know if I quite agree with that. At least to the same extent. Mainly because I feel like this film does a good job of tying things together. I mean, the way you felt there is kind of how I felt with. I don't know if any of you guys seen the Women in Black remake, or not remake, just the Women in Black.
The sequel, Angel of Death.
I didn't see the sequel, but the first one, I hated that movie. Part of the reason why I hated it was because I felt like every single scary scene was just there to be a scary scene. I didn't feel like anything felt connected or tied up. That wasn't my only problems with that film, but that was something I definitely felt in that one. But it's Insidious.
Did you read the short story?
I read the whole novel.
I thought it was more like a novella. Sorry, not short story. Yeah, so have I. I would probably agree with you on every point of that for Woman in Black. It felt more like a good, decent first horror film if you're a sleepover at 10 years old.
It was definitely neutered for young people, and then they completely butchered the ending. But let's not go into that.
Well, obviously, like I'm being like a little jokey and stuff, but to me it did
joking. Never.
But it did feel like kind of like you can say like, I mean, it is all connected because there's this whole thing with like the further and these ghosts that, it can be kind of like any ghost in there and they're kind of escaping through and whatever. But I don't know, to me it did feel like it was just kind of like, oh man, what would look cool, what would look creepy, but I don't think that in this case, I don't think that was necessarily a bad thing, because it probably wasn't the case, but if it was the case, it was so well done that it didn't matter.
Well, I think that whole plot, the whole mythology of the third and the idea that all these different ghosts are trying to get to the kid, just lets them do that. Like they've given themselves that opportunity. So, you could argue that's either convenient or just really smart writing. Yeah,
that's true.
I mean, as for the characters not being that deep, I guess I agree with that. But
because I mean, really, like like after I've seen these a couple times already, but after I kind of watched it this time, I tried to sit down and kind of really like think about the characters, and like I honestly I could not tell you anything about them other than it's like, well, it's a frustrated mother, it's a dad who is a little, kind of clueless, doesn't know what's going on as much, and scared children. Like, I had no idea what their personalities were like. I don't know what they do for jobs. The only people that really had any kind of like personality to them were the investigators and Elise. But I mean, and again, like that might be more of a criticism for other movies, but in this case, it, everything else was done so well that it's almost doesn't matter that much.
I think that's almost a standard complaint you can make towards about 90% of horror films, is that the characters aren't that deep. And a lot of the time, horror movies can still be great when they don't have deep characters, or they can still be suck, but they'll suck for other reasons. It's kind of a weird genre in that respect. It kind of it lives on its own rules that don't really apply the same way as other genres do.
It's like the atmosphere.
Yeah, because I mean that whole standard thing you do when you're, and I've taken script writing classes, and the whole standard thing you do where you have a protagonist who has an arc and learns something about themselves, that almost doesn't apply to horror films at all. Yeah. If you've got a movie about a serial killer going about killing people and the main characters try to survive, trying to force in an arc where they're learning something just kind of feels like an exercise for the sake of doing it. It's not really what the movie's about. So, and anyone who teaches script writing would tell you, no, that's why the films are terrible, because they don't have that. But it's a slasher movie. Go away. I don't want it to be deep and retrospective. If I want that, I'll go watch something else. And I do often. I don't just watch horror movies, as these guys know.
That'd be great if just at the end of the movie, the main character's like, and that's how I learned to become a man.
I'm not. It'd always be a girl, though. Slasher movie, it's always a final girl who's left alive.
It's true. Yeah.
All right. Anyone else have anything else they want to wrap up with? No? Okay. Alright, cool. So that has been episode 2 of Screams After Midnight. We'll be back next week. Do subscribe to the YouTube channel Mailed Fuzz, and check us out on Twitter at mailed_fuzz. All of these guys' Twitters and stuff will be in the description. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you next week.